Welcome to the Chase Hudson Show, a podcast dedicated to inspiring you to become extraordinary. Each week, we sit down with top-tier business owners, real estate investors, and influencers to inspire you to build your legacy. It's time to level up. Welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today, we have Lowell Crabb, who is the founder of Drive Wealth Advisors, an independent wealth advisory firm with over $2 billion in assets under management. They focus on serving high net worth individuals, families, and business owners. Really great conversation with Lowell, how he was able to build Drive Wealth from the ground up, from 20 million to 2 billion. It's truly an incredible feat, and he shares some great advice on how to structure your finances and then just great advice for entrepreneurs and life in general. So really excited for you guys to hear this one. And with that, let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Chase Hudson Show. Today we have Lowell Crabb, who is the founder of Drive Wealth Advisors, an independent wealth advisory firm that specializes in serving business owners, corporate executives, and high net worth individuals. So with that, welcome in, Lowell.
Well, thank you. Yeah, good summary.
Yeah, happy to have you in here. This is fun. We were just talking about some of our mutual connections, and this is your first time doing a podcast.
Yep,
and
first time.
Excited to hear your story. So it should be great. Well, with that, I typically ask my guests to talk just a little bit about your upbringing. So, what listeners should know about your childhood, early years, teenage years, or any influences that molded you?
Yeah. One thing that's maybe interesting that some people don't know. So my parents met in college in a band. So they both of them are passionate about music, entertainment, and that's really kind of where they bonded. My mom actually hated my dad at first because when they were brought together in this band through a mutual connection, and my mom was like, dude, this guy's arrogant. You know what I mean? It's like, she's like, I can't stand this guy. But because they were forced to be together all the time on the weekends, when their friends were out, just hanging out, they were doing gigs. And so eventually he won her over, and she saw the other side, and they ended up getting married. But the reason I bring that up is because music has been maintained as like one of the most central themes of our family, and just kind of that's an area where my family has bonded all growing up, and just been really influential in a lot of ways. I'll backtrack, but even like and then how it applies, because I think your question was how that's been influential and whatnot, but it's really, I've noticed as I've kind of gotten to my career and just other facets of life, how developing the creative side of that brain, it's really important. Even in businesses where, which I would consider mine to be a little bit more of a technical one. But I've noticed with all of my clients who have, built companies, led organizations, things like that, it takes not just the science, but an art and kind of that ability to have vision and to create and to think of something that's abstract and put it together. And music was for me, I think very influential in kind of my career path and doing that. And so anyway, parents met in a band. My dad decided after I was born in Utah, but when I was about 6 months old, he decided to kind of reinvent himself. He'd actually taken the band, the music thing as far as he could go. I mean, he wrote a lot of music. At one point, I don't know, it could be real big fish stories, who knows, but he had met with some producers or record people down in LA. They compared him to James Taylor and folks like that. And so he really wanted to pursue it, but when he started to have a family, he realized that was probably not really conducive. And so he kind of reinvented himself, decided to go back to school through a couple different connections and whatnot. He applied to Columbia University for law school, and that took us out east. So born in Utah, but raised in New York. diehard Mets fan, just from my times, living in New York in the 80s, big baseball guy. We lived in the city for about 3 years while he was getting his law degree, and then moved about an hour north, White Plains area, after he graduated. Those childhood years were really, really special. I mean, just kind of observing my parents as they kind of slogged through building a family and building a career. New York is a dog-eat-dog environment. I remember, they wanted us to live in the suburbs. They didn't want us to be in the city, and so that's why we moved kind of an hour away, but which was a sacrifice for them. And some of my fond memories were, in the morning, we only had one car. My dad was just barely getting out of law school. And so my parents had one car for a long time. And there was three kids at first, two came later. But we would have to wake up in the morning. Like, my mom would drive him to the train station, so we had to wake up extra early, drive to the train station. And then he'd work till super late at night, just kind of earning his stripes with the firm that he was working with. And so she'd put us down, to sleep, and then wake us back up, and we just pile in the car and we drive down to the train station. And I just remember being half asleep as a little kid and watching him just kind of stroll out of this train station super late at night every night, and then wash, rinse, repeat. He'd do it again. So that was, those were, some fond memories. Just, kind of watching my dad, kind of just build his career and hone his craft, which was super influential. And then, about the time that what happened with him is that he went to Japan on a mission, and so with the firm he was working with, as luck would have it, and again, kind of going back to this theme of creativity and entertainment, but he, because he could speak Japanese, his firm won the bid to represent Paul McCartney on a world tour, and two of the spots on this tour were in Japan. He had a couple different events in Tokyo, and so they needed someone who could speak Japanese. And so, since my dad was fluent in Japanese, he got the nod, to be on the team to represent Paul McCartney. Well, as soon as you represent Paul McCartney and that's on your resume, you immediately become an entertainment sports attorney. You know what I mean? Because he's just such a huge name in that space. And so, so that really kind of catapulted, kind of the vertical in his legal career. Not to mention the fact that in the 80s, the Japanese have always been fascinated with, American culture and sports and entertainment. So there was a large demand for, in that part of the world, to facilitate opportunities, for those types of things. So between the slant of kind of being able to speak Japanese and then representing Paul McCartney, he became this sports and entertainment attorney, and eventually the firm wanted to transfer him to LA because that's the mecca of sports and entertainment. And so then we moved from coast to coast. Went from New York to LA. Kind of it was interesting being the son of what at the time I didn't know it. One of the things that's my dad. One of the most influential people in my personal life. Super grateful to have both him and my mom as parents. But it was really interesting. He went on to represent a lot of other famous people. He Dave Matthews Band when I was in high school. That was kind of at the height of Dave Matthews Band, and he was representing him on a number of things. I don't really remember what, but. But it was funny because my friends, he'd come into town to perform. My friends be like, "Oh, we're all going to the Dave Matthews Band," and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And I remember I went home. I was like, "Dad, do you know that Dave Matthews is, performing in in LA tonight or whatever?" He's like, "Oh yeah, man, I forgot. I could have gotten us backstage passes to that, but oh, And I was like, "Dang, Dad, why aren't you hooking it up?" But the point is that. He worked with a lot of these, famous people, but it never really kind of affected him. He was always, he would always tell me, he's like, people are people, people have strengths, people have weaknesses. Some of these, people that are larger than life probably have greater weaknesses than the average, and the challenges that they face are unique, because, they are thrusted into situations that, there's not a lot of script for it, and so I that kind of stuck with me, is like, oh yeah, fame doesn't necessarily, equate to being necessarily like a great person. And we still also have challenges, and there's all still things that we struggle with. And that kind of came back, as I kind of built the business, working with a lot of folks that are, very, very successful and influential, not necessarily celebrities, but just realizing that we all live in our own, sphere, and we all have kind of our own subset of challenges that we go through, regardless of wealth or prestige or whatever else. So that stuck with me. The other thing, I mean, I can't, talk about upbringing without mentioning my mom. She was like a Oklahoma girl. She grew up on a dairy farm. She was like, you hear parents and seniors will talk about how life was so much harder, but I think her life was legit like that much harder. She would, wake up before the sun came up, strap on boots to her knees, and, go find cows and milk them in the morning. And her dad was, it was family business. They worked that farm just to get by. She was the only girl in a family of four. She had three brothers. And so she just, both her and my dad, but in different ways, were just super exemplary of just super hard workers. And just took their calling in life with extreme seriousness, and my mom was like, she was the one that stayed at home, supporting my dad in his career, and then, watching over us. But she was like, the mom that was always volunteering for everything, hosting, the sporting teams at our house, helping with anything that she could. And it was always with the most, sincere intent, never to try to like catapult us anywhere. She was just pure, genuine, like, I just want to be there, to help. That stuck with me even today. So, so that's a little bit about my upbringing. Coast to coast, super excellent parents, couldn't ask for better, super fortunate. And just a lot of good attributes that I was able to pick up from that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Lowell. It sounds like you've got some great influences there between your mom and your dad, and being able to see your father rub shoulders with some influential people, some wealthy, famous people. Pretty cool dynamic there. So I saw that you went to BYU. Going into BYU and your college experience, what was kind of your mindset? I mean, did you know you wanted to go into financial, be a financial advisor, wealth management? How did you kind of decide on your career path?
Yeah, no clue. So, in high school, I guess the other thing I, kind of backtracking, in terms of upbringing, I mean, what I cared most about was sports, particularly, baseball. In that quest to be a good baseball player, the other, thing, I guess, big life lesson was, I was a pretty hefty kid when I was younger. I was like, I don't know, by the time when I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school, I was like 250 pounds. My mom's from Oklahoma, like I said. And so she took her calling serious, right? So she would bake a lot of food, sure. And she was all about, biscuits and gravy, and, kind of grew up that way. And so, anyway, I had to figure out when I was 14, being like 250 pounds, and it wasn't muscle, cause I was just a kid. I had to figure that out. And so, I realized it was about the time where it was like, girls at school were like wanting to have me, introduce them to my friends. And wasn't getting much attention from them. And then I was like, well, the only like professional baseballs that I can, baseball players about the same shape and size that I was probably like Cecil Fielder and like maybe Babe Ruth back in the day, So I was like, I got to figure this out. So, but it was really something that I was very passionate about. I had to, I ended up, at the time we didn't have like, phones where we could track stuff. So I bought this, yellow book that had like all the fat grams and calories and stuff in there. I just started kind of watching what I ate and got into like a pretty regimented like exercise routine. Just had to work on putting it together.
Yeah.
But those that was, I remember the first time I ran them, I went on the track and I was like, okay, I gotta like learn how to exercise. And I was like, I'm going to run a mile. And I was, timed my mile. My mile was like 16 minutes, and it was, which is not, for anybody that runs knows that that's not very good. And I was like dying when I was done.
Sure.
But had to learn how to kind of stick with it. Had to get real regimented about kind of tracking my data and around what I ate, kind of learning food science. And all with the intent of just trying to excel in sports and things that I was passionate about. And again, those are pretty important life lessons that kind of came back into play later on too. But anyway, I went to BYU. Long story short, I got a chance to go to BYU to play baseball. It probably wasn't through academics. I wasn't toiling in high school being like, all right, how am I going to be like a financial expert or whatever else. It was all about social relationships and, playing sports. Got up to BYU, was reported to kind of fall ball. And what had happened was the coach that was there at the time had just been replaced with a new coach. And that new coach came in and he was like, hey, this is my program, this is my regime. I don't care who you were. And I remember I'm sitting in there and there's like these guys and, BYU's got these return missionaries, right? For those that maybe haven't attended or know about BYU, but you got these guys that go on missions and LDS missions and they, for a sabbatical for 2 years, and they come back and they're like sophomores in college, but they're 23-year-old, developed men, right? So I'm like this 18-year-old kid sitting in this room with these dudes with like full blown beards, and just jacked dudes, and you got this, my lifelong dream was to play, advanced, sports, and looking around and this coach who's pretty intimidating guy, was like, I don't care if you got what you got offered. This is my program. I'm going to pick who I want. I'm going to build this new team. And so that created that put a lot of pressure on me, because it was like, oh man, I thought that's what I've been working for in my during high school and all this to kind of get that opportunity to be on this team. And now it's like, now I'm like sitting here and this guy's telling me, it's like, no, you're gonna have to reprove yourself, cause you're not one of my guys. And so, what ended up happening was it's just, again, life lessons, right? It's like sometimes when you want something so bad, you squeeze so tight, and it has the opposite effect. And so I went to fall ball and just put so much pressure on me, on myself to perform. And as a result, the exact opposite happened. Played really poorly, and to the point where, sure enough, he brought me in the office and said, "Hey, you're out." And that was a really tough experience for me. I felt like my world had like shattered. I mean, hindsight, it's like, hey, it's a sports team. There's a lot of other things that are more important than that. But for me, as a 18-year-old kid who was chasing a dream, that was a really big deal. So what that caused me to contemplate, ended up reverting. I went on a mission for the LDS Church, came back, And then, you contemplate like, what am I going to do when I grow up, and how does that influence like what kind of classes I take, things like that. And so, that experience, made me really, really passionate about, performance and performance anxiety, and what makes the brain, work. And I just became really curious about that. And so as I was looking at various majors and classes to study and things like that, I fell on psychology actually. And then I also loved the idea that you could help people. You think about like psychology in the most like rudimentary way. It's like, oh, you become a therapist. You know what I mean? You can help people like with their issues. So that was my undergrad in college. I was a psychology major, and some aspects of it I really liked. Other aspects I didn't care for. Again, because I was really I wasn't really into like the behavioral disorder stuff. It was more like, hey, I want to understand performance and motivation and what makes people tick and excel, and that kind of thing. Took an internship with the sports psychologist at BYU towards the end of my tenure there, thinking that that's what I would do for a living. I'd be like a sports psychologist, and realized through that experience, like just in kind of like picking his brain and learning about that industry, that it would require an immense amount of schooling, PhD, things like that.
Yeah.
And that there wasn't like a sports psychologist at every program. I was like, oh crap! Like there's one sports psychologist for like the whole major league. You know what I mean? Like they're like they get contracted, and so breaking into that space, I realized was extremely, extremely difficult, and wasn't sure if the academic side really played to my strength. So I started to kind of question that right at the tail end of college. And at that time, I had a buddy who was also, we were all kind of in the same boat trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And he's like, oh, let's study for the GMAT and go to business school. And so I was like, okay, cool. So started studying for the GMAT, started looking at business programs, because I was like, oh yeah, business, that makes sense. And all of the programs that were at all reputable, most of them wanted like 3-4 years of post-grad experience.
Yeah, sure.
And so I was like, well, what am I going to do to get experience? I was a psychology major. During undergrad, I was working at a youth corrections home with like teenage kids as like a private contracted like parole officer, which was a cool experience. Lots of good learning there, but not really applicable for graduate school. And I started looking. I was like, okay, well, what do people want? And everybody was all the experience that they wanted was like accounting, financial related. And so I started just kind of, throwing my resume around to try to land some kind of finance job, not knowing the difference between like corporate finance or personal finance. I had no clue. And the only groups that were like offering me jobs were on the personal finance job side, because it was like sales, Yep. But again, I didn't know. And so, but anyway, that was kind of my lead into the industry was more just like a pit stop on my way to get an MBA. And eventually, took a job with just a regional, financial planning shop. And got into that. And when I was interviewing with the companies, the various companies, they told me, they're like, well, it's a little bit entrepreneurial, salesy. It's like there's no set salary. You kind of have to build a book and a business. And they showed me these stats saying like, okay, about 12% of people make it past like year 3 or 4. But if you can make it past year 3 or 4, then your income really starts to jump up. And I had like $10,000-$11,000 in the bank account. I was only spending $1,000 a month, and they were kind of explaining to me kind of like, what it was like. It was like, oh, you're working with people and you're helping with money. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like psychology. You know, it's like
Sure.
I'm helping them with their money problems. And I like the idea about that because when I was working for the youth corrections group, I realized I was like, you know, it's hard to help people with like deep psychological problems. You know, it takes a toll on you. And so I liked the idea of like still being able to help people, but in something that was a little bit more, you know, it was a little less abstract. It was more around like, you know, numbers and something that was tangible to a degree. And so I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot because I got $11,000 in the bank and I spend $1,000 a month and I can live for 11 months without really making any money, you know? So we'll try it out. And so that was my entrance into the space, thinking that I would do that for 3 to 4 years, get the experience and then go back and get an MBA. So. And
did you end up getting an MBA or you
No. Yeah.
Just ran with it?
Yeah, no, it took me about a year and a half to realize that this was something that I was like really passionate about, and something that I had a knack for. And so I ended up sticking with it.
That's great. So I saw that you were with Beneficial Financial Group, Links Consulting. Was that one of the two that you started?
Yeah, Beneficial is where I started. I lasted there probably about, it was probably 6 months or so. Okay. Not that long, maybe a little bit longer than that. But I got in and realized that, it was a company that provided financial advice, but it had, the underpinning was, had insurance, they were trying to sell product, it was insurance and then mutual funds, things like that. And it didn't take me long to realize like, that's not how I want to kind of go about conducting business. It was more about, just helping people with problems. As opposed to trying to Jimmy rig a product into a square hole or whatever,
Yeah, exactly. Makes sense. And then how long were you with Links Consulting? Was that the next group?
Yeah, that was the next group. So while I was at Beneficial, the founding member of Links, worked with they worked with kind of like higher net worth clients, and they did a lot of creative strategic work, and some of the strategies that they employed or deployed used life insurance, and so they would use Beneficial product for a lot of those strategies, and so I got to know him from just going to like a fast start conference, like some of the newbies, the new recruits, they bring you up, and met him, was really impressed by, what they were doing. Started to do like some joint work with them just on the side, because I was like, I was just dialing for dollars, I was just like tapping into my network that I built while I was at college. And, I tell people even now, a lot of, I attribute, it's not all luck, but I mean, right place, right time, like Utah is just flourishing, especially Utah County, just flourishing with like so many successful entrepreneurs that just really have rung the bell over the last decade or two. And so I consider myself a benefactor of that, frankly, as these just talented people have created a lot of success, and have needed help to oversee that success or that wealth associated with. I was there with a catcher's glove to kind of help them out, But as I was trying to farm, these relationships, and I was just like, fully aware that I was this young kid who was still just learning, and so I was just like, well, whatever I can do to help them was what I was about. And so I was leaning on, the folks at Links, just in terms of like joint work and kind of mentorship to, figure out how to provide, solutions to solve the problems that people would voice when I'd call them up and, ask them to work with me.
Yeah. Right.
So, and eventually they said, hey, just come on over, work with us.
Okay.
And then that I worked with them for about 7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then from transitioning from Lynx to Drive, so you now have, it sounds like, about 7, 8 years of experience
Sure.
in wealth management. Yep. What was it about, what made you want to start your own business? What was the driving factor?
No, that's good. So when I was at Lynx, when I'd meet with clients, the Lynx group still, had a tilt towards insurance as well, but they would do insurance, but then they do like these advanced like tax planning strategies, things like that, and which was great, and it was helpful for some of our clients, but I still wanted to. It was still a little bit more product focused, and so my clients would come in, and we'd help them with the various things that we knew we could help them with, and then they'd be like, "Well, what else?" And I'm like, "Shoot!" And here I am, I'm just trying to just hustle, I'm just trying to hustle to kind of build the business, and I'm just like, man, I just thirsted to find ways to provide, value in the realm of finance, because that's what they were expecting. And again, I'm just, I only knew what I knew. It's not like I went to, worked at like Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch or one of the big bracketed group, banks, that gave me like kind of like the lingo and kind of like gave me the base education around like how the financial like world worked. Yeah. And so I was just kind of hustling around, just trying to find solutions, and learned that there was a fee-based way to help clients, through building what's called an RIA, or a registered investment advisory firm. And so I kind of took it upon myself to try to build something like that inside of the framework of Lynx, because I knew that we needed it. So I was kind of like this offshoot inside the firm, just kind of toiling around with figuring out how to provide a more robust, helpful subset of investment opportunities, for our clients who were having a lot of success and needed more advanced, planning. Thankful to my partners. I mean, they let me do that inside of Lynx. They let me just kind of, flex my entrepreneurial spirits and try to figure that out. And so we kind of incubated that. But as it started to take shape, there were just some natural conflicts from the way that they were running that business model versus how I wanted to run it. Just from what I was learning with the RIA space and whatnot. So with, long story short, it just got to the point where the way that I wanted to structure the business to help clients just wasn't cohesive with the group that I was with. So I felt compelled, basically. I wasn't like setting out being like, oh, I need to go start my own firm. Like that wasn't like something that I was like, it wasn't a goal in my mind to see like, oh, I need to go start this company. It was more of a necessity thing because I was like, hey, I need a format, it's chicken or egg, it's like they build it, they come, people come, right? So I was like, I need to make sure that I have an infrastructure in place that can support, a framework that can help clients the way that I thought would be best for them.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So what was that, when you had that realization, you knew you had to kind of jump ship and do this on your own. What was that first year like? I mean, were you able to, take a book of business and just, it was like cake, it was easy to do that? Or was it like building from scratch? What was that? Maybe the early days. Yeah.
I remember I like went to my wife, I got to give a lot of credit to my wife because she's jumping away from a form of security and often to no man's land. I mean, like that's not for the faint of heart, Yeah. And at the time we had, I think we had just had our first we had just had our first child, Abigail, and it was 2014. And she knew that I was kind of struggling with, just the dynamics of like the current firm that I was in, just because it was no fault to my partners or anything. It was just, trying to put put the Rubik's Cube together, and it was there. We weren't connecting. And so that's where she was actually the one being like, well, why don't you just start your thing, And I really appreciate, because, she's probably like far more like risk tolerant than me, like naturally. She just has the attitude of like, yeah, things will work out, like no biggie. She doesn't need a lot of things, she's not like, for her to feel secure, it doesn't take a lot. She's can be comfortable in any kind of like environment. Sometimes we'll have tiffs about it, because I'm like, I'm working real hard, and she's like, I don't care, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, we're having this success, and to her it's like, oh, it's great, what I mean? And it's like as a man, like trying to like provide in the relationship, it's like you're like it's kind of like almost deflating, but also like probably the reason why I was able to do it is because she didn't throw up any kind of blockers. In fact, she was real encouraging about it. And so she was like, you should just do it. You should just try it. She's like, she saw how I worked, and probably had a lot more confidence in my skills than I had in myself. And was just like, yeah, you're going to have success if you do it. Even when I was like, I don't know, you know what I mean? So, so she was kind of the one that encouraged me to kind of take that step forward. I was able to take my clients, although that's scary too, because you never know how they're going to react. When you say, hey, I'm shifting from this other company to starting something from scratch. Right. So there was like definitely some, from some fear around how that would play. Yeah. Signing a lease on an office, committing like to 5 years on an office lease, was also kind of like a scary thing. So yeah, man, look, anybody that's started something could probably empathize. I mean, it was definitely like a jump off the cliff and into the water, and hope you come up for air. It was kind of a scary time. Yeah,
I love it. Was it just you? Did you have anyone coming with you?
Yeah, no, it's just me. Yeah, just me, and I brought one employee from the other firm. He was planning on making a change anyway, and so he came with me. So yeah, it was just two of us. And then we would I would hire some interns, and we just started going after it.
Good stuff. Yeah. So you're coming up on your 10-year anniversary, right? Yeah. 2014. So walk us through after year one, like how have you guys grown? What has been, your strategy to bring in growth, to bring clients in over the last, 9 years or so? How's it been?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm like, I don't know, whenever you work in an industry, you see the good and the bad, right? And I think like the negative stereotype that you see in our industry is, a lot of the customers will say, they don't really work for their fee. You know what I mean? It's like you got these relationship guys that out playing golf all the time, and kind of like professional party planners essentially, and they take our money and they charge a fee, and there's like no value,
Interesting.
And at least that was like the negative feedback I was getting from like the community when I would, when I would talk to people and be like, oh, I don't want to have an advisor or whatever.
Yeah.
So I became really passionate about just wanting to provide a lot of value for, and commitment when someone entrusted us with our money. And the other thing I realized too is that it's such a trust-filled relationship. It takes a lot of time. And so, early, I mean, I would attribute like, the growth really started, it happened pretty quick. When I started Drive, I mean, when I first, I don't know, I should have come prepared with the exact numbers. I think when I broke off, I think I was managing probably like, I don't know, 20 million bucks. And, today we sit a little bit above 2 billion. I think it's like 2.1 or so. It's
amazing.
And that's, and like you said, I guess that's almost 10, it's 2015. Okay. So that's how long we've been an organization. But I would say the framework of that, happened far before I started Drive. It was cultivating relationships and planting seeds. I'll tell people we're like farmers. We plant seeds and water it a lot, and toil do whatever it is to make the ground. It's like whatever, however you want to like use the analogy, but you've got to build that. You've got to build that trust. And we just kind of did a lot of pro bono work, frankly, because there's a lot of clients that had, pretty large or potentially large balance sheets, but not a lot of liquidity because they were running businesses and were reinvesting back in that business, or just hadn't taken chips off the table or whatever else. And so my mindset was always like, hey, I want to build the trust when the stakes are lower.
Yep. And
find ways to really just provide value in any shape or form. And then that way, when the event happens, they'll feel comfortable, coming to me and trusting me to help them with that next step. Because I recognize, I was like, if I'm trying to go kind of win business at when they're about ready to, sign the purchase agreement on the business. I mean, I'm like fighting against every dude with a plane and cufflinks, flying in from New York and San Francisco, So I just, that was kind of my style, and it was just a slow kind of just growing process that, started to kind of take off eventually.
Yeah, so. Love it. And for you guys in your client base, is it mostly high net worth? I know, so I worked at JP Morgan for a little bit in their private bank.
Yeah.
And so they have like the ultra high net worth team, and then the lower end. So do you guys sit in a certain threshold of net worth for clients or liquidity?
Yeah.
And then are you nationwide? Are most of your clients here in Utah, or where are they based?
Yeah. So a couple questions there. So you could say that we're nationwide in the sense that we've got clients in the majority of states. It wasn't because we've got outreach marketing programs to try to be national. We're like 100% referral. I don't spend any money on marketing other than like taking clients to a jazz game or on a trips to just for nurturing relationships and stuff like that. So. So it's all organic, and that's just kind of taken us to various places throughout the country. I would say probably like western half of the United States is probably where the majority of our clients are as a result. So that you wanted to know that, and then what was
your typical client size?
Oh yeah, sure. So we cater the where we kind of sit in the market. We're an investment management group, so we manage portfolios, obviously. But what I'm really passionate about is providing kind of more of like a multifamily office experience. I recognized with kind of all the success in Utah that was like percolating, that you had all these like first generational really wealthy families that it was a new experience for them, and there was a lot of complexity associated with that wealth. And so when they would come to me, like, the investments, they almost kind of perceived as like a commodity. They're like, oh yeah, you can throw money into a stock and bond portfolio. But what they really needed help with was, tax management, cash flow management, understanding estate structure. Usually what happens is like they'll get ready for a business transaction. They'll meet with an attorney. The attorney suggests some kind of form of complicated trust schematic, and then you have to operate that structure, and it's hard to remember. You know what I mean? It's like, oh crap, I've got like this family trust, and I've got my legacy trust, and I might have one that's domiciled in Nevada for tax planning purposes, or I might have this asset protection trust because I sign on all these loans and have investors and things like that. And so like knowing how that money should flow so that you keep that intact was complicated. And then, lifestyle stuff comes up, right? It's like, people have an exit and they want to buy second homes. They purchase, airplanes. The fabric of their life like starts to kind of take shape. And so like maneuvering that is is complicated and it takes time. And now they've got they're like, hey, this isn't like managing a couple $100,000. This is like managing many millions of dollars. So if I make a wrong move, I think the impact of their decisions starts to weigh on them. And so, I recognized, a lot of the really, wealthy families were choosing to go out of state to get their services because there wasn't really like a down the street, solution for that type of client. So it's like kind of it's the family that's probably like too large for like what I would like, describe as a retail experience, but probably doesn't have the balance sheet to have a true family office. There's a lot of families around here that have they'll even say they have family offices. And it's a vague term. It's a very like abstract term, but I wouldn't consider like having like a one person with an assistant like your family office. You know what I mean? Sure. Like to have a true family office, the expenses to run one of those things is probably about $1 million a year. If you're going to have like a property manager on staff, you have accounting folks on staff for reporting, you've got investment professionals on staff. I mean, that's a serious engagement. So our firm is like, hey, if we can deliver the core elements of a family office for, for a plethora of really wealthy families that need that service, then but for like a much like a fraction of that cost, which I think we can do just through good operation. Then that was kind of the business thesis, as we kind of like got Drive going, and was really just a byproduct of just talking with a lot of clients, and again, just trying to like pull the room around like people that are really successful and wealthy, folks that I wanted to work with, and really try to understand what their pressure points were. So that's what Drive is today. We do have clients that fall below what I would describe as like a ultra high net worth person, which is like 30 million. I think if you look at like industry terms, it's like a $30 million plus balance sheet. So we do have folks that are below that, but again, the growth strategy is take bets on. It's almost like mini investments. Make investments on folks that you've had some people on your podcast that are in private equity and other investors and stuff. And I say, hey, some of my clients are investments. We're not profitable on some of them, in the early years, but we want to invest in them, basically a call option on their future, because we think that there's going to be they're going to be a great match. And so we do have a segmentation within our firm where we've got kind of our multifamily office clients, and then we kind of have like a next tier down, which we call our private clients, and those are our $5 to $30 million folks.
Yep.
And then I've got some legacy clients and folks that, we would call like kind of just our wealth management clients that don't really receive the breadth of that family office experience, but still we can manage money for them. And so that's how it breaks down.
Well, it sounds like you're offering a very holistic approach to wealth management and an incredible service to these families and individuals. So kudos to you guys. Where do you, right now, so $2 billion under management, which is incredible and extremely impressive. How many employees do you guys have now? Yeah,
the team is about 30 members strong.
Okay. 30 members.
That's
great. And I met with Alec Ferguson, who's a buddy of mine from BYU, with Drive, and he had mentioned that I'm just curious to hear the story from you. You guys had acquired a building recently in Lehigh, and he kind of mentioned some of that. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing. Like, sure. I'm just curious as business owners when you think about leasing versus owning, and what the process for acquiring a building to lease and own, or to own and operate. Yeah.
So again, I think it started out. It's just natural like business progression stuff, right? Like we were growing at a clip where we would sign a lease and then blow out of that space, just because we were. And again, I'm a conservative guy, right? So like when I would go sign a lease, I'm being like, okay, what do we need, And I would forecast somewhat and say, okay, we can grow into this, within the next year or two or whatever, but we were just accelerating far beyond those timelines, so and it's complicated. Where you reside as a business, especially in a service based business, where you've got customers visiting you, and and all that, it's important, to make sure that you're in the right spot, and have the right setup, to house everybody. So after kind of like blowing through a number of those leases and realizing like, okay, I'm going to have to bite the bullet and probably like just bite off a bunch of currently unused space with the anticipation of growth. It was just kind of that, again, just being an investor, being like, well, I'd rather monetize that than throw that money out the door. And so that was when I started to contemplate, like, okay, does it make sense to own where we live as a business as opposed to rent? And then what had happened was it was kind of I didn't intend on buying a 20,000 square foot building. You know what I mean? That wasn't the initial intent, but it was right around COVID, and the building that we now are in had been on the market for a second, and there was just some opportunistic elements that came into play that allowed us to kind of sneak in and make that purchase. And so I thought it was a value play on top of the fact that the location and the aesthetics of the building kind of fit what our business needed. And I also thought there was a good thesis around the building. It's the largest pallets are about 10,000 square feet. So it's kind of built to be more of like a house, like service based, local professional type businesses, not a lot of tech. And that's played out, because we didn't, it's not like we were foreseeing the fact that, we'd have interest rate issues and banking restrictions, especially around office specifically because of COVID and work from home mandates and all the uncertainty around how businesses are pivoting. And so that building has continued to maintain 100% occupancy through all of that, and we're positioned really well. And so it was a combination of like, hey, I knew that the business had a need. And then as I went out for that, went out and tried to find what was out there from an inventory standpoint, this building, popped up, and that was very much opportunistic and something that we determined would make sense to jump on. So we did.
That's great. Well, there's so many benefits to owning the real estate, in addition to just the space itself, right? And so that's great for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Lowell, just kind of a case study. So for entrepreneurs who are on the up and up, and they're building a business, and maybe they have some, a good amount of, cash flow coming in from their business, but they don't really know, what to do with from an investing landscape, and thinking about the options out there. Do I just plow everything back into my business? Do I start investing in a 401k, an IRA? Do I do an HSA? Yep. Like, and maybe it's like an upper 20s, lower 30s guy, guy or gal who's just in it. What maybe advice or would you have for someone in that kind of scenario? I'm just thinking about people who listen to the show, like
for sure,
people who might be in that build mode.
For sure. So the first thing I'll say is that the principles are the same, regardless of where you're at from like your financial timeline of life. So whether you're just getting going, whether you kind of like are 10 years into your stride, or whether you've exited a business or been operating a business for years and have acquired mass amounts of wealth, the principles are the same. So whenever I meet with somebody, I'll tell them, I say, hey, and this is kind of counterintuitive because I think people expect us to kind of just jump right into like, okay, here's the investment lineup, Let me show you what we got. But I'm all about making sure that we really understand the situation before we get there, because one investment could be really great. Investments are somewhat, obviously there's good investments and there's bad, but you could have an investment that is in and of itself a great investment, but terrible for one person and great for another, just based upon their situation. So I'm all about owning, cash flow and structure first. So whenever I meet with someone, as mundane as it may seem, or feel to them, I'm like, hey, you've got to own your personal P&L. And I'll make the analogy of kind of like, just like a business, if a business owner is running a company, they have to own their P&L. And it's funny because I'll meet with them and most of our clients are business owners at different phases of their career. And I'll say, okay, show me the financials of your business. And they'll like whip it out in like a second, because they either have a controller or they're close to the vest on managing the business finances or whatever. And they'll know top line, bottom line in an instant. And I'll say, okay, well, like show what's your do you have, show me your personal P&L. And they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I try to teach them like, hey, your family unit is like a business unit. The intent is just maybe different. And so you've got to own that the same way that you own the financials of your business. Otherwise, it will unravel on you. And so it's important because I think a lot of times, especially the more wealth you get, the less concerned you are about like tracking expenses. You're like, I'm liberated from that. That's why I'm making the money, right? Yeah. And, but it's like I mentioned earlier, the larger you are, the harder you can fall. And so it's not about tying a belt around somebody's waist. It's all about awareness. And so if you understand, what your cash flows are, both top line, bottom line, then that will set the stage on saying, okay, how much liquidity do I need to have? How much can I put away or not put away on a monthly basis? It's great to be able to say, I'm just going to save every month. You hear you read the financial books. It's like, just learn how to save. But people need to know like what is the responsible way to save. And that will dictate whether or not you put money into a 401k or need to keep money liquid and, things like that. A lot of our clients, our investment lineup is, I don't know if we say, if you would say we're unique, but from a thesis standpoint, we believe in making sure that you're drawing from all the viable asset classes, both public and private. And so we spend a lot of time diligencing, private market investments. We think that's where there's a lot of inefficiency and where you can, achieve outsized returns if you do it correctly. But in order to, but part of that outsized return requires you to, be a little less liquid with your money. There's an illiquidity premium associated. So if you don't have your cash flows honed in and you go and to try to make an investment in something that's illiquid, even like the building that we were talking about earlier, you could be in a bad place because, you didn't set yourself up to allow yourself the time to work your way through, unknowns, like for example, in real estate right now, there are probably some people that figured, hey, when they bought their properties, 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be able to refinance, I'd do a recap, get some cash out, and they can't do it right now. Right. And so you have to go into it recognizing that you don't know all the variables are at play. No matter how smart you think you are, there's just things that you have to admit to yourself you don't know. And you have to build contingency. And part of that contingency is making sure that you own your personal cash flow situation. And then ownership is a big deal too, especially for folks that are entrepreneurs because it's just not that simple. You've got, you might have partnerships and, various business relationships that require, various entity structuring, things like that. And so, it's always better to have the right skeletal structure in place so that when you start adding the meat, to that structure, it's going into the right place and you're not building a mess. I'll have lots of guys come in, to work with us, and that's part of the acid in their stomach is like, dude, I have all this stuff, but like it's owned incorrectly. Yep. I'm not optimizing the taxation of my various investments that I own. I've got liability. I've got partners that we don't have operating agreements on, together with, so there's all sorts of messes. And so if you just get that, put first things first, get some of those things ironed out on the front end, then the right investments naturally rise to the surface. And that's like, it's not rocket science. We'll sit down and we'll start to kind of, when we get to the phase of building out the investment construct, it's not like we have to toil hours and hours to come up with the right secret sauce. It really is kind of self-manifesting. So.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love the concept of laying the foundation, building the structure, and then going from there. And I think for me personally, I'm not there yet to a point where like, hey, I need to lay out, do the trust, do all the stuff. I'm kind of in the boat of like, we're just building, you know,
For sure.
We got to get off the ground here.
Yeah.
And so, but I love it. I think that's amazing advice. Well, last few questions, Lowell, and we'll wrap up. So what's next for you guys? So 2 billion AUM, you've got your own building, 30 employees. What are the next, 5-6 years look like for you?
Yeah. I'm really, I love, what I get passionate about is finding new ways to enhance the service for the client. And so I'm always, trying to just fine tune the subset of offerings, that we provide them, and find new ways to kind of like be relevant in the landscape amongst our competitors and whatnot. So I think it's just that constant like refinement. There's always things to do to improve. There's always more offerings that we can provide that requires human capital, just because it is a service-based business. But like I said, I mean, we really want to be kind of like, known in the community as like the go-to to handle these complex balance sheets. And so I think that's something that's always on my radar, something that we're trying to always further develop. And then the other thing too is probably just on the topic of human capital, just refining the culture. When I started out, like you asked me the question. I mean, yeah, it was me and one other person, and obviously it's not that anymore. But one thing I've learned is that we have amazing people in our office, but trying to transmit like all of the at bats, that I've had with clients and all the little mini case studies that have come out of that, and findings and understanding like the persona of the people that we serve, so that they really feel like they are getting a good experience. It's I have a lot of respect for people that are really great managers of people and of organizations, because that's hard, and so transmitting some of that to the culture of the firm, and bringing up kind of like the next in rank to to really help kind of take the business to the next level. I think that's a big objective. I'm a big believer that good service, good product, that's what creates sales, not the other way around. So it's kind of the old adage, you build it, they come. If we just execute, word spreads, especially in kind of like a very intimate, service model like what we have. And so if people aren't happy, people will find out, mm-hmm. and if they are, then that spreads too. And so I think just constantly executing is really the key for our growth and development as a firm. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
And then, Lowell, what advice would you give for a budding entrepreneur, someone starting a business? I know that's pretty broad, but
yeah. Somebody
just wanting to do their own thing, what advice?
You have to do something that you have to figure out what you're passionate about. When I was in college, it was really interesting. I would take these courses. I think I mentioned earlier, like some of the subject topics in my major as a psychology major really appealed to me, and others didn't. And the ones that didn't, my brain would just shut off. I wouldn't profess to be like this excellent student, because for me, I couldn't motivate myself to spend the needed hours and time learning something that I didn't care about. And, I see that even with like people, in my, some people that we've hired, other people that I interact with in the community, you can tell, when you see someone that's like excellent at what they do, it's because they have a sincere passion about, what they're involved with. And it solves so many of the problems. So if you get into something that you truly love, again, that was something that my parents taught me. They always were like big believers of do what you love, right? Even if it doesn't make a ton of practical sense, you can find ways to make money doing anything. That's really fascinating. That's one of the things I love about what I do is I meet with these people that have had success in the most obscure ways, like people, there's the classic, right? It's like, okay, like a surgeon or something, that's like one way to make money, but it's like people have built these businesses that are just very unique.
Yeah.
And it's because they had passion for what they were doing and they found ways to excel in their respective space because they wanted to take the time and the energy to really refine and to hone and to create a craft, that was unique, and that's what builds great businesses. So
yeah,
that'd be my
great advice.
Yeah.
And the last question for you, Lowell, maybe outside of the professional setting a little bit, or just thinking about life in general, holistically, how do you define a life well lived or success for you personally?
Yeah, for me, it's probably twofold. One is is mastery. I want, you hear people say it's like Covey, I think in one of his books, he talks about picture your funeral, right? And people at your funeral and, what do they think or whatever. And, so for me, it's one thing to have stuff. It's another thing to, become something. I would kind of think about the progression of money and how that influences people's lives. But stage one, it's like survival, right? And then stage two, it's like people checking off bucket list items. It's like getting the car or going on the trip that they could never go on or whatever. And they have to get it out of their system. It's always funny when someone sells a business or whatever, and we're going through the cash planning. I almost encourage it. Some of my clients will be like, "No, dude, I don't need anything. I'm going to put it all to work." And I'll push back on them and be like, "Dude, you are going to want to, do some stuff with this money. Whether you think you do now or not, you will." So I almost I'm adamant about making sure that you've got some bucket list money, set aside. And then phase three of wealth, the money just becomes a facilitation of what that person's, passions and character is. Right. And, so it's really fascinating to see how that money, influences decisions that people make once they've kind of gotten through the survival and the bucket list checkoffs. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's it's great. Having success monetarily is wonderful. It can help you accomplish a lot of things. It breaks down barriers. It opens the world up so that you can do things and meet people and have opportunities. But for me, it's all about hey, I want to have self-mastery and be respected for being, accomplished at whatever it is that I'm setting out to do, whether it be in business. Obviously, I've got the lifelong quest of being a good husband and father. My wife, she makes sure she keeps me in check on knowing where I'm at, mm-hmm. and that carrot is far away. So I got a lot to run to get there, but I think self-mastery is a big thing. And then I'm super passionate about making sure that everything you touch is just at least a little bit better than how you found it. So, whether that be, relationships in your life, whether it be a business service that you render, if you're working in a business, the role that you play, taking that role and saying, okay, how can I improve this from where it is right now? And I think if collectively we did that as a society, it'd be amazing. You know what I mean? And so having that attitude of just mastery and improvement in whatever vertical or verticals that you're choosing to take your life in, that would be kind of my definition of success.
Amazing. Well, no better way to end, Lowell. Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it, and the advice that you provided. Truly incredible what you've been able to build.
Yeah, you got it.
Wish you all the best.
Yeah,
going
thanks
forward.
for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to The Chase Hudson Show. If you liked what you heard, please leave me a review and subscribe to this podcast. Reviews really help us to find better guests and to improve the overall quality of the show. If you'd like to connect with me directly or want to learn more about investing in real estate, send me a DM on Instagram at @officialchasehudson. Again, we really appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.